Hello, and welcome to this important session on FOP clinical trials and studies. I'm Michelle Davis, Executive Director of the IFOPA, and we're thrilled that you're with us here today. We're going to start with a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you are needing translation in either audio translation in either Spanish or Portuguese, that would be Brazilian Portuguese, you'll want to click on the button for Kudo. We also are very pleased to be able to make this a global meeting and offer translation in 25 different languages. And that is our artificial intelligence translation provided by Wordly. So you'll want to click on the button for Wordly if you'd like to activate one of those translations. You'll also find a button on your screen for chat. It's a great place to say hello to one another, to share where you're from. But you'll also see a button for Q&A, and that is where we ask for you to place your questions, any questions that you have for this session. Please don't put them in the chat. That's for communicating with one another. But if you have questions for the presenters, please put those in the Q&A. And those questions will be answered at the end of the session. Okay. Well, as I said, I'm Michelle Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the IFOPA, and it's an incredible time to be a part of the FOP community. And that is due for many reasons, but especially because we are living in a world where there are currently 5 clinical trials that are active for FOP in phases 2 or 3. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, is about those clinical trials. But before we start, I'm going to do just a quick overview of the trials that are currently available. Okay. So we're going to start off with the trials that are in the latest stages and work backwards. So the first trial we're going to talk about today is the PIV1 trial. And that trial is testing the drug palovarotene. Many of you know that name. The important thing to know about the PIV1 rollover trial is that you must have been enrolled in the Int'l trial in order to participate in the rollover trial. You can see here that if you were in the MOVE trial and you're of age 14 years or older and 100% skeletally mature, or if you reached your full adult height in the opinion of the investigator, that you may be eligible to participate. We're looking for an estimated enrollment of 87 people, and there will be 10 sites for this trial, and 4 are already recruiting. You'll see at the bottom of each of these slides that there is a URL where you can go to for more information, and that will actually take you to clinicaltrials.gov to the trials listing on their site. We've just tried to make it easier for you by creating a short URL. So that's the PIV1 trial. I think one thing that's important to mention is that you have hopefully heard, we announced on August 24th that that there will be an FDA advisory committee meeting to review palovarotene capsules. It is being held at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration by the Endocrinologic and Metabolic Drugs Advisory Committee. You will see that there is an opportunity for people from around the world to submit letters to talk about the patient experience of living with FOP. And you'll see in red where you can find more information at ifopa.org/FDA_testimony. Global submissions for these letters are accepted, but they must be written in English. These letters are being sent to the FDA for the advisory committee meeting that will be held on October 31st. So please be watching your email, be watching the IFOPA social media channels, and as soon as we have the link on October 29th, we will share that with you so that you're able to watch the advisory committee meeting that's taking place on the 31st. It is not the final decision of the FDA, the decision of this committee, it's merely a recommendation, and the final decision on whether palovarotene will be approved, palovarotene capsules will be approved in the United States, will come on December 29th. So let's talk about the next trial that is actively recruiting. This is the STOP FOP phase 2 trial for using the drug saracatinib, which is a kinase inhibitor. The basic eligibility criteria is that you must be age 18 and up, and there are additional inclusion-exclusion criteria that you can find on clinicaltrials.gov, and you'll see that short link under more information. They are looking for 20 enrollees, and this trial is limited to 3 sites in Germany, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. The next trial we're going to talk about that is also a phase 2 trial is the Falcon trial. This is also an Ipsen clinical trial, and they are testing also a kinase inhibitor, and you'll see the drug IPN 60130. That's the drug in this trial. This will be a trial that will ultimately take children age 5 years and up. But for now, the trial is only enrolling ages 15 and up. So as safety is tested in that age group, in 15 and up, then once that's evaluated, then if things are still considered safe for children, that will move down to the lower ages. But for now, you must be 15 or up to be considered for this trial. You'll want to go to the link, which takes you to clinicaltrials.gov for more information. They're looking for 90 enrollees in this trial. There will be 19 sites around the world, and there are 12 that are currently recruiting. The next trial is with Incyte, and you'll see the drug name here, INCB 000928. It is also a kinase inhibitor. This trial is enrolling ages 12 and up, and you'll want to check the website for these additional inclusion-exclusion criteria. They are going to be looking for 60 enrollees, and there will be 20 sites around the world, and there are 3 that are already recruiting. And then the last trial that we're going to talk about today is the Regeneron Optima phase 3 trial. They are testing the drug garetosmab. It's an activin A antibody, and this trial will be open to people age 18 and up. You'll want to check the website, clinicaltrials.gov. There's a short link on the slide for the additional inclusion-exclusion criteria. This trial will need to enroll 66 people, and the trial sites have not yet been announced. But again, if you go to ifopa.org/optima, that will take you to clinicaltrials.gov, where you can watch for announcements about where that trial will be held. Okay, and with that brings us to the end of our session, the introduction to the session. And I am pleased to introduce you to our first presenter. Our first presenter today is Caitlin Knox. She is the Director of Pharmacoepidemiology at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, and she's going to talk with you a little bit about Regeneron and the work that they are doing in FOP.
Morning, good evening. I'm Caitlin Knox, as Michelle said, and I'm a pharmacoepidemiologist at Regeneron, which means I study the use and effect of drugs in large numbers of people. Today, I'm here to talk with you about a new study that we're doing, an observational cohort study to look at the natural history of FOP. I'm really excited about this study because I've been working in rare diseases for 10 years and for the last 3 years in FOP. I'm really passionate about supporting and sharing information about rare disease with communities like yours. So let me start by talking about the need for the study. As you know, FOP is an extremely rare disease. There are only about 900 known cases in the world. In addition, the gene responsible for FOP was identified in 2006. So we've only had a standard definition for FOP for about 15 years. So not surprisingly, the published literature is not extensive. It's not like cardiology where you can type it into Google and get mountains of information. There are significant gaps in our knowledge. For example, the literature commonly references anecdotal evidence on the excess mortality risk associated with FOP, but we really don't know if it's true because it's only anecdotal evidence. There have only been 6 studies in the last 40 years that have even mentioned mortality in people with FOP. All of us in this community, patients, providers, caretakers, and researchers, we all want the same thing: to help patients with FOP live better lives and eventually find a cure. We can't know where we're going unless we know where we're coming from. So the first step is to better understand this disease. Thus, we've designed a large, first of its kind, population-based study. It's a 5-year retrospective cohort study that will follow confirmed people with FOP in the US through real-world data. We'll find people using the IFOPA US membership database. They will be de-identified using a proprietary algorithm, which means that we as researchers won't have access to their names or any other identifying characteristics for patient privacy. We will then follow the patient journey through existing claims data and electronic medical records to explore the clinical characteristics of people with FOP. So to give you a few examples of what we hope to learn are things like, how often do people with FOP go to the hospital? Why are they going? How often do they experience infections? What type of infections are they experiencing? Are people with FOP getting pregnant? If so, what are the outcomes? This type of objective information on the natural history of FOP will help caregivers, treating physicians, and researchers do more to help patients. So let me pause a moment now and see if there are any questions that you may have about this study. It's okay if there are no questions right now. You're more than welcome to send them in the chat for later for the panel discussion. But with that, I want to conclude my presentation noting that there is limited information on the natural history of FOP right now. We are excited to be sharing our plans for this first of its kind study, and we really look forward to publishing our results in collaboration with IFOPA and making them available to all of you. So thank you so much. And with that, I will turn it back over to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. It's exciting to hear about that study. So next we are going to hear from Dr. Stacy Kalish, and she is an associate professor at the hospital at the University of Pennsylvania, and she is also a sub-investigator on both the PIV1 and the Falcon clinical trials.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. As Michelle said, we're going to talk about 2 of the trials that she so kindly introduced everyone to, the PIV1 and the Falcon studies. You can go ahead to the next one, please. So just a quick note that while these studies are both sponsored by pharmaceutical industry sponsors, the information that I'm sharing with you today is coming from me and not from them. Go ahead. And then this is just a quick note about what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk very briefly about the rare disease drug development process. I know you saw some of that in the video, and then about these 2 studies. Next one. Can I have the next slide, please? Perfect. So I hope that this shows up okay for you all. I know that it's a little bit small, but when I went looking for an image to talk about the rare disease drug development process, one of the images that came up actually was from the IFOPA. So I thought that it was perfect to use. And what I want you to get from this is that there are a number of phases and that all drugs, if they eventually are approved, move through this process, starting with phase 1. Phase 1 studies are generally very small, under 50 participants, and are short of just a few months. And the people who are involved in these studies are not necessarily impacted by the rare disease that we're talking about. So in this case, they may not have, these are not specifically people who have FOP. And the goal of a phase 1 study is really to find out if a drug is safe, what might the side effects be, and then to think about what happens to the drug in our bodies once we take it. So how is it excreted by the body? Does it stay in the body long enough to have any effect? For drugs that seem safe and we can understand and think that they may be able to have an effect after phase 1, we move into a phase 2 study. And one of the studies I'll talk about today is a phase 2 study, and you'll hear about some others. This is the first time that we use a drug in an individual who has the condition. So in this case, these are the first studies looking at a medication in people with FOP. These are still relatively small studies, usually between 10 and 50 people, and last anywhere from a few months to a year or two. The goals here still are evaluating the safety of the drug, but now for the first time, we're also evaluating whether or not the drug is efficacious or has the effect that we hope that it does. We may also consider several doses of a drug in a phase 2 study. After that, we move on to phase 3 studies. So these are a little bit longer and a little bit larger, so will involve more participants. And in a phase 3 study, while we're still evaluating the safety and the effects of the drug, we may also be comparing other preparations. So either dosing regimens or preparations of the drug that may make it more tolerable or have more effect. You can see at the bottom of the slide that only about 25% of medications that are studied will go beyond a phase 3 to seek approval. And when medications seem to be safe and have a good effect after phase 3 studies, then we can look at regulatory review. And this is the point in which the sponsor of the studies may start to seek regulatory approval by agencies in a number of different countries, and will start to work with those agencies on also how they'll market the medication should it be approved. At that point, if the medication is approved, then it becomes available to anybody who has that condition. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to switch gears and talk about the PIV-1 study. So the PIV-1 study is a rollover study that's a multi-center phase 3 open label study. So what does that mean? The rollover part means that this is for people who have participated in previous studies who can then roll over into this study. Multi-center means it's occurring at a number of centers. Phase 3 is what we just talked about. And then open label means that everyone who's involved in the study, the participants, the researchers, are open to whether or not people are getting medication or not. In this study, everyone is receiving the medication palovarotene. So the study is then to further evaluate safety and efficacy of palovarotene in male and female participants aged 14 years and over who have FOP, who have completed prior palovarotene studies and may continue to benefit from therapy. So palovarotene, as you just heard, is a selective retinoic acid receptor, a gamma agonist, and this works to limit heterotopic ossification, or abnormal bone growth, by reducing BMP signaling. And this is important because we know that people who have FOP have mutations in the ACVR1 gene that cause excessive BMP signaling. Next slide. So I mentioned this is a rollover study and that you need to roll over from a prior study. There have been a number of previous palovarotene studies that are listed here. The first one listed was actually a natural history study. So this was a study of people who were evaluated for clinical features related to their FOP, but who did not receive any medication. And this was to help us understand, similar to what Dr. Knox was just discussing, what FOP disease is like, how quickly it progresses, what kind of pattern of progression it may have overall, so that we can compare people who are being treated to what the natural history of the disease is without treatment. After that came the 201 study, which was the first phase 2 study, which enrolled 40 subjects and included 3 groups of patients. So people with higher dosing regimens and lower dosing regimens of palovarotene taken with flare-ups or with placebo. After that, there was an open label portion where anyone who participated would continue on receiving just the higher dosage regimen of 10 milligrams and 5 milligrams for flares. That was followed by the 202B and then the 202C, which were additional phase 2 studies. In the 202B, there was chronic daily dosing added, so not dosing with flare-ups, but just dosing every day, plus an even higher dosing with flare-ups for those who are skeletally mature. And only flare-up dosing continued for those who are skeletally immature. And skeletal maturity is really a measure that we can determine based on x-rays that helps us determine how close bones are to being done growing. There was a similar 204 study that was specific to the French population that was very similar but had a few small differences. The 202C then included chronic daily dosing for everybody, and then was followed by a phase 3 study, which was the 301 or the MOVE trial, which was a larger study enrolling 107 people that again used chronic daily dosing, then followed by flare-up dosing. The endpoint for all of these studies was heterotopic ossification, or how much of the abnormal bone formed. Next slide, please. You may be aware that from these prior studies, we were able to learn that palovarotene can have an unwanted effect, and that's the premature closure of the growth plates in some people who are skeletally immature. And that's the reason the later studies that we just talked about had different dosing regimens for those who were skeletally immature. In January of this year, palovarotene was approved in Canada, the first country that approved palovarotene for use in people with FOP. The brand name for that is Sohonos, and this is approved because of the concerns for skeletally immature individuals in females who are 8 years of age or older and in males who are 10 years of age and older. The difference in the ages for sexes is because we know that females tend to have earlier puberty and then earlier skeletal maturity. In the United States and in Europe, the regulatory applications are ongoing. So in the United States, this was initially submitted to the FDA in May of 2021. The application was withdrawn a few months later to allow for some additional analyses and evaluations of the data, but was resubmitted in April of this year and accepted for priority year in May of this year. And as you just heard from Michelle, a decision is anticipated before the year is over. Next slide, please. So what does the PIV1 study look like, or what is its study design? So as we discussed, it's an open label extension for people who have participated in either the 201 or 202 or the 301 study. So the beginning of the study is really when you complete the prior study. So it involves an end of parent study visit that will then also include the inclusion or the beginning visit of the PIV1 study. From there, you go into the treatment period, and the treatment period includes the regimen that we've discussed already. So chronic daily dosing with 5 milligrams, and then flare-up dosing of up to 20 milligrams taken daily for 4 weeks, then followed by 10 milligrams for another 8 weeks. This dosing of 10 milligrams can be extended if flare-up symptoms are ongoing, and the study involves visits to the site, either to the site in person or remote visits every 6 months. And it's anticipated that this will continue either until palovarotene becomes commercially available and accessible, until it's available by another program, or until the study ends. And this is anticipated to be sometime near the end of 2024. Next slide. And then this is just a graphical way of looking at this. So you can, at the study design, so you can see on the left, expect up to 87 people to participate in this study. They'll complete their end of study visit from their prior study and their inclusion visit for the PIV1 study. We'll move into the treatment period where everyone will receive the same dosing regimen that we discussed, and that this will continue with visits every 6 months, either remotely or on site, until palovarotene is available in another method, or until the study ends. Next slide, please. And then we're going to shift gears and talk about the Falcon study. So the Falcon study is a phase 2, two-part, placebo-controlled, parallel group, double-blind study. So what does all that mean? The phase 2 part we talked about. So this is the first in humans with FOP. The 2-part means that there's 2 different parts to the study, and we'll see what those look like in a minute. Placebo-controlled means that at least in the first part, some portion of people participating will receive placebos. Placebos are versions that look just like the active drug, but do not have active drug in them. Parallel group means that all of these groups will be going on at the same time. And again, we'll look at what this looks like in a moment. And then the double-blind part means that nobody who's involved, so neither the participants, the physicians, the researchers, the clinical research team, none of us know whether participants are receiving placebo or dose. And there's 2 doses in the study, so no one knows what dose participants are receiving. And this study is to assess the efficacy and safety of the 2 dosage regimens of the oral medication, which is called IPN 60130, for the treatment of FOP in male and female participants 5 years of age and older. So IPN 60130 is a highly potent and selective ALK2 kinase inhibitor, and so it works by targeting the abnormal ACVR1 or ALK2 receptor in people who have FOP. Next slide, please. So the study design for Falcon is a little bit more complex. It's a 26-month-long study that will include the screening and end-of-study visits. There are 2 parts, and the first 12-month period is placebo-controlled. The expectation is to enroll 90 participants. So in Part A of the study, this is a 12-month period that's both randomized, placebo-controlled, and has 3 arms. So what that means is that participants in Part A will be randomized in equal numbers, so 1 to 1 to 1, between receiving either a high dose of the investigational drug, a low dose of the investigational drug, or a placebo. In Part A, pediatric participants, so those who are between 5 and 15 years of age, will be included, but only on the recommendation of the Data Monitoring Committee after they're able to evaluate 6 months of safety data in a number of patients who are 15 years of age or older. So as Michelle mentioned, the goal is to enroll adolescents older than 15 and adults to follow and to conduct the study for a period of time to evaluate for safety. And then an independent committee that monitors the data will determine if it's safe to proceed with younger children. In Part B of the study, this will be another 12-month period, but there'll be only 2 arms. So those who received the placebo in Part A will then be randomized to either the high dose or the low dose of the investigational product. Those who received IPN 60130 in Part A will continue on the same dosing regimen they were in. It's important to note in this study that the doses are weight-based in both parts. So the high dose and low dose refers to a specific specific dose compared to an individual's weight. And this drug can be taken as an oral capsule, or the capsule can be opened and sprinkled onto food. The endpoints in this study are both HO, heterotopic ossification formation, and also safety. Next slide, please. And so this is what the study design looks like in terms of visits. There are quite a few visits during this study because it is a phase 2 study where we're gathering both safety and efficacy information. So there'll be visits that are all on site for the screening visit. So this is the initial visit where we determine if you meet the criteria and are eligible or are healthy enough to participate in the study, and also have active disease where we can determine if the disease has an effect. We'll then see participants on site for the day 1 of the study, which would be the first day that a participant takes their dose. And then at month 1, month 3, month 6, month 12, month 13, 15, 18, 24, and at the end of the study. We'll do lab studies, EKGs, and echocardiograms, so to evaluate the heart function at all on-site visits. And then pulmonary function testing is done at screening and then at a number of future visits, and CAT scans are done on the day 1 visit and then every 6 months. Next slide, please. So then this is the study design for the Falcon study, again in an image form. So the very beginning on the left is the screening process with randomization. And then you'll see in Part A, participants are randomized into 3 groups, one with a low dose, one with a high dose, and then one receiving placebo. And then in Part B, those who were receiving high dose or low dose will continue on in their same group. Those who were in the placebo group will then be randomized to either high dose or low dose of the investigational product. Next slide, please. And then this is the final slide that I brought. So this is just a comparison of the 2 studies. So you'll see PIV1 is investigating palovarotene, It's an open label extension following prior phase 2 and phase 3 studies. So again, that means that everyone is receiving drug and everyone is aware that they're receiving drug. It's only open to those who were in prior palovarotene studies. It includes both chronic daily dosing and flare dosing. And there will be site visits every 6 months that can be done either remotely or on site. By comparison, the Falcon study is investigating IPN 60130. This is the phase 2 study that is in 2 parts. In part A, there are the 3 arms of a high dose, a low dose, and placebo. Part B, just 2 arms of high dose and low dose. This study is now enrollment is open and ongoing with a plan to enroll 90 subjects, and then the site visits are listed here again. Thank you again for inviting me to talk about these studies today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalish. It was great to hear from you about both of those studies. I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Marlies Eekhoff. She is an associate professor at the Amsterdam University Medical Center. She is also at which is an FOP expert center at the Amsterdam Bone Center.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a pity we can't meet in person, but I'm very happy that I can have contact in this way. As already said, my name is Marlies Eekhoff. I'm internist endocrinologist and in the lead of the Rare Bone Disease and FOP Expert Center in Amsterdam, UMC. Here you see at the first slide all the people who are the team of the Stop FOP. And today I will speak about the Stop FOP because we are performing more trials in Amsterdam and we support all that. But today I will give the presentation of the Stop FOP saracatinib trial to prevent FOP on behalf of the whole team members, as you can see on the slide. Next slide, please. The Stop FOP trial is a trial in which saracatinib is investigated to prevent FOP. It is an investigator-initiated study. We got funding from the European Union via the Innovative Medicines Initiative. We are working together with a large team, which you can see on the right. It's a public-private consortium together with AstraZeneca, in which 3 centers perform the study. That is Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Garmisch-Partenkirchen in Germany, and London in UK. And we work together with 2 other centers, Boston and Oxford, who performed the preclinical studies. We work together in this team very closely with the stakeholder board, in whom IFOPA participate, and we're very, very grateful that IFOPA is giving so much support to the Stop FOP. Below the last sentence, you can read all the other patients' organizations who are part of the stakeholder board, which is really exciting to collaborate with. Please, the next slide. Here you can see that saracatinib was identified as a potential drug for FOP because it directly blocks the region affected by the mutation, the ALK2 protein or ACVR1 protein. You see here, I can't show now, on the left. Because it directly blocks this region, it is potentially one of the most robust inhibitions. Because it blocks the activin neo function, also the BMP hypersensitivity, and the leaky signaling. If it actually does this in a clinical model, we hope that it can block the active disease, the flare-ups, but also the chronic disease, the slow growing of HO without flare-ups. And if it turned out that it is sufficiently active, We hope the drug can be used later on to enable surgery in FOP, which is not possible at the moment because if you perform a surgery, heterotopic bone will recur even more than before. But then we hope that locked joints due to HO around them can be unlocked. Next slide, please. Okay, I think again the other slide. Here we show the preclinical. This is again the explanation how the drug blocks. Can you go on? Yes. This is how activin activates the ACVR1 and many bone mutated receptor. Many bone is formed, but this drug can stop exactly at the place where the bone is being started to being formed. Next slide, please. The very advantage of saracatinib is that it has been studied before and now reused for reposition in this clinical trial. It was first developed for ovarian cancer, then tested in many other diseases, cancers, in healthy volunteers, in other diseases. So there it turned out to be safe. And so we have the safety data in at least 700 people in healthy volunteers, which is very good to, before we started, it felt very safe and it's good for the future, for the further development. The doses that was used before in all those trials were higher than the dose used in STOP-FOP. The STOP-FOP dose is based on the preclinical data, and we expect that it will enough target the receptor. Next, based on all the data. Next slide, please. Here you see the preclinical data gathered by Paul Yu and Alex Bullock. They started to screen a lot of compounds and they were searching for the compound that would has the highest affinity and would bind the best to the mutated receptor. And as you can see on the left side, saracatinib was by far the compound that had the highest affinity and binding to the receptor. Then they went on to the next, but the following figure, where they showed that it really can bind to the receptor itself by X-ray crystallography. And then they looked at the different dosages, and the different dosages could inhibit the BMP signaling. With this good results, they tested the saracatinib in FOP mouse models. And on the left side, you can see that there was only a vehicle given. There's a lot of HO formation, but on the right, down the lowest picture, you can see that if they gave saracatinib at the beginning or during the duration and the life and the trauma of the mice, and there was much less HO forming. Next slide, please. Okay, that has already been explained. Because of all those information, we could directly go to a phase 2 trial, and that is the STOP-FOP trial. Next slide, please. During the STOP-FOP trial, we aim to investigate both effectiveness and safety in people with FOP. I will come to it later. Next slide, please. As already explained, we performed the trial at three clinical sites: Amsterdam, London, and Garmisch-Partenkirchen. All the patients from those countries can participate, but also patients from other countries if it is not too far, it is feasible and possible. And next slide, please. The study is designed as a 6-month randomized controlled trial, followed by an open label extension of 12 months. The reason we designed it this way is that we also can compare the open labeled study with historical data, but also the patients who had first placebo can be compared with themselves in the open label where they received the medication. As already has been explained, the randomized controlled trial means that blinded to the patient and to the doctors, you don't know which medication you will get. It will be the drug or it will be a placebo, but after 6 months you will get the medication, and it is important to receive good data and to really can understand whether the drug is doing as we expect. And next slide. The screening, the visits, it's a little bit less than in other studies, but good for the study. Of course, after screening visits, after the patient starts with the medication, we will see the patient back after 3 weeks for a control visit, and then every 3 months. Next slide, please. We aim for 20 patients between 18 and 65 years, but there are not that much, most people can participate, but the main issue is that you need to fit in a CT scanner. We have a very beautiful website. You can always email us and we can discuss whether it is possible or not. Next slide, please. The medication is given orally by tablet that can be crushed every day. And the trial has as endpoint the PET-CT, which is the lower part on this slide. We look at the increase of the HO, but also secondary endpoints are the activity, the diary, that means the flare-ups. We look at pulmonary and cardiac tests, questionnaires about how people feel and how their flare-ups are going, the activity of the disease, and also cages and movement scores. Next slide, please. Well, what happened since the last patient gathering? Well, we started in the Netherlands and we are also running in Germany. It is going very well, the study. The UK will start soon. But we face quite a lot of problems, and not only Brexit, but also COVID, as you know. And that's the reason why we only could start at 2020, the first patient, and it took till 2021 for the second patient. But now there are nearly 15 in, and when the UK starts, we will go for the 20 patients. Next slide, please. Well, the COVID has a great impact. That means that the study has a longer delay, but the EU agreed on going on for a longer time with the study. So we are still recruiting now, and UK will start. Facing all the problems of the COVID, we took quite a lot of measurements to keep it safe for the patients. And when it was not feasible to see the patients at our clinic, there was even a possibility to go to another clinic, all due to the difficulty that FOP patients should not get COVID, as we know. Next slide, please. Well, this was my talk. We are very happy that we can collaborate so well with all the patient organization. It is an investigator-initiated study, which makes us more open in the discussions, and it's really great to perform this trial together with the whole team. Thank you very much, and if there are questions, please let me know.